right, here's a few news articles. Italy has outlawed facial recognition tech. This article wasn't entirely clear, but I think it's just for government agencies, in which case it's really something that also happened in the United States. I think government agencies are not supposed to be using it either now. I know Microsoft stopped their program to develop it and so on. Facial recognition test for purposes of government and police has proved to be highly controversial, and most people have quit using it. It has too many errors. It fingers the wrong person, it's racially biased, and people have just decided not to use it in America, and apparently now in Italy also. This is a proposal to improve security, which is pretty simple. If you just always fill everything with 0 anytime you allocate storage, say on the stack or the heap, this would end about 10% of all serious vulnerabilities, all RFCs, which makes a lot of sense. There's a whole lot of attacks that rely on exposure of secret information that's left in memory, so it's not a bad idea. Perhaps someone would like to add this to languages like C and such. So this I found very interesting. Of course, there's no way to verify it, but this is someone who claims to know what really happened with FTX, and it's very interesting. I mentioned before there is a 6-month-old Bloomberg podcast video on YouTube interviewing Sam Bankman-Fried, where he explained that the way it works is I put up a box and I say, why don't you put your money in this box? And people say, why should I? I say, well, I'll print these tokens and I'll give you some tokens if you do that. They said, but the tokens don't have any value. He says, well, people will pay something for them. And then you give them more tokens and they put more money in, and then it gets popular, and then the tokens gain more value, and off you go. And it turns out that's not exactly what he did. What he did is more interesting. He ran several different exchanges and pretended they were separate. And then he launched a token. And what he did was he would launch a token and then only sell 1% of the tokens. So the rest are just in reserve. And then he would have another one of his fake sock bucket accounts spend $1 million to buy those tokens to push the price up. Now, the apparent value of his 99% reserve has gone way up. So now he spends $1 million. Now he appears to have $100 million worth of tokens to sell. So he would use that as collateral to borrow money. This is how you go from 0 to 20 million doing nothing. And this is what I've heard. This is the kind of stuff that goes on all over the crypto market. The exchanges make fake trades to make volume go up. They print a bunch of tether based on nothing to buy Bitcoin, to pump up the price of Bitcoin. So it's pretty common. And also one thing I thought is quite interesting, which Prof. Galloway did not seem to know on his podcast, but the All In people knew on their podcast, is that apparently, I'd like to hear a lawyer talk about this. Hey, if you run an exchange and people give you money to buy Bitcoin, you're holding it for them, you can't invest that money. You're just holding it like a bank account. And if you do invest that money, that is a huge crime. And I guess we're going to see, because that's totally what he did. He loaned that money to another exchange he ran that needed the money, and they say it was a huge crime to take the money out of the exchange that people had deposited with him, although I know banks can do it. So apparently, whatever legal space exchanges live in, they're not allowed to do it. Anyway, it's a very interesting thread, and he also explains there was a connection to politics. He was a major Democratic donor, I think the #1 Democratic donor this year. He promised to donate $1 billion, but he really only donated like 20 or 30 million. But both of his parents are lawyers from Stanford and deeply involved with the Democratic Party, and apparently this was all carefully planned to try to manipulate the Democratic Party into passing pro-crypto legislation to legalize his activities. And he might have got away with it, except Ching Zhao, the owner of Binance, was an early investor in FTX and held a large number of the tokens. And Sam Bankman-Fried did something to hurt CZ, to make him an enemy. So CZ decided to publicly announce that he was going to sell all his tokens, which would cause the price to crash, because he heard rumors about what he had been doing, taking the money out of here to fund another, realizing how fragile he was. So he made a public statement that he was going to dump his tokens and crash the price. And that caused a run on the bank, which caused him to crash. And so it was, he deliberately caused the crash of this. But anyway, we'll see. Of course, a lot of crypto projects are going to fail at there's low valuations. And the ones that do sloppy things like this are going to crash. But this appears to be a crime, they say. I wonder about that, though, because most of it took place in the Bermuda. deliberately be outside the United States. So it seems like the United States law would not apply. But anyway, I guess we're going to hate lawsuits and all that jazz now, and maybe we'll find out how much of it was really illegal. Hello, Rouhani. Anyway, so NASA had, I didn't know this, but spacecraft, aircraft, and power plants all mix low priority traffic with high priority traffic on the same wired Ethernet network. They use something called time triggered Ethernet. So the traffic that comes in at a certain time is low priority, or is low security, and the high security stuff is on the other networks. They're both on the same network, which sounds like a really bad idea, and in fact it is. What these guys found is all you have to do is use a coil or something to put magnetic noise in this line, and that noise will confuse it, so it takes your low priority traffic and sends it down the high priority channel. And in a simulation, they were able to make a spacecraft fail to dock, because data sent down the low security channel would actually affect the engines and make it go off course. So now they're fixing that in some of these devices, but of course some of them are already deployed and hard to fix. So it's an interesting vulnerability. I'm surprised they used that design decision. So Elon Musk is just exposing himself to be enormously like Trump. He lies like crazy. He made false statements about Twitter's advertising reach. He said, more clicks come to you from advertising on Twitter than anything else, which is laughably absurd. Everybody knows Facebook is 10 or 20 times more effective. And now he's firing anybody who dares to criticize him. He's firing employees. In fact, he appears to be firing employees who retweeted the tweets from people that criticized him. There are people who didn't even say anything about him who are just told, you have violated our terms of service, you're fired, and you get no explanation at all. And you get fired by tweet, and a bunch of the early people, he fired them without telling them anything. He hadn't announced anything. He hadn't even had a meeting. They just try to log in and their account is gone. That's how they find out they're fired. Which, by the way, is not that rare in tech. There's tech companies that find out they're fired by showing up at work and the door's locked and you can't get in. This is the kind of thing that happens. But but the fact that he lies all the time, I think, is somewhat new, and that he won't even listen to anybody criticizing him. This is the sign of megalomania reaching its peak when this is usually the point at which in a Shakespearean play the king falls, when you become this arrogant. And I think it's happening. The Tesla stock is falling greatly. And people are complaining that he's destroying his brand and Tesla stock is falling. And how is he going to pay attention to Tesla when he's spending all his time at Twitter? And what the hell is he doing at Twitter? He doesn't seem to be saving it. He seems to be destroying it. So people are fleeing. And I moved to Mastodon like a lot of people did. There's an InfoSec Exchange Mastodon that's very good. I'm still on Twitter in case it survives. But for information security news, you get far better information in InfoSec Mastodon. And it's actually much better. It's just specialized security news. It doesn't have all the politics and everything. So you can have general news on Twitter. And InfoSec Mastodon is all just security research and security conferences and stuff. And it's really quite valuable in that regard. So Amazon, Microsoft, and Google own 76% of the cloud market. Amazon owns like 30-something percent, Microsoft 20%, and Google 10% approximately, what they have. And they're talking about it. It's interesting to know. And the cloud spending is going up and up, and it's growing like 30% a year, which is crazy, still growing. So the cloud is huge, which I think a lot of us know, but it's interesting to know, even with the recession and everything, it's not slowing down. So American Treasury is targeting people in Iran that sold the drones to the Russians to attack the Ukrainians. And this is sort of an interesting activity considering we haven't actually declared war on Russia. But anyway, and I'm not exactly sure what it means for the Treasury to target them, sanctioning the firms. So I guess they're going to punish them economically somehow. Anyway, I'm not quite sure what this means. But it is certainly true that Iran is selling drones to Russia, which they're using against the Ukrainians to commit war crimes, to attack civilians and stuff. And apparently now people in Poland, which may actually start World War III. That's the big thing. They just sent missiles that went off course and hit people in Poland, and they're having emergency meetings of NATO right now to decide whether NATO has to intervene. Presumably not. They'll just call this a mistake or something, but we'll see. Ozempic is this drug that's hitting all the press. You lose weight on Ozempic, but it has serious side effects. It's intended to help diabetics, but people are using it off-label for weight loss everywhere. And many people are saying it's quite effective. You really do lose weight, but if you ever quit taking drugs, you'll just gain it back. And it has a lot of side effects. And a lot of people are very sick on it. Heart palpitations and nausea and all kinds of stuff. So it doesn't sound like fun. Facebook has a policy which they've reminded their staff of, since Trump is supposedly announcing his candidacy again right now. They're reminding them, after Trump declares himself a president, you will not criticize any of his statements, will not do any fact-checking. Facebook's official policy, there is no fact-checking on a candidate's statements of any kind, which, I can understand why they do it, because the Republicans lie like crazy with claiming the election is fraudulent and everything, and you pretty much have to go to the full MSNBC way and just become an organ of the Democratic Party, or you have to let them lie. Facebook has definitely chosen to just let them lie. Twitter chose to just have no political ads at all last time, which is another way, just try to stay out of it. The problem is the Republicans spew out all these lies, and then if you're any kind of news source, you have a serious decision to make. Do you contradict these? Do you label them? Do you just publish them as if they were true? What do you do? People have struggled to try to find some way to handle that difficult situation. So this company went and analyzed how much Mac malware there was and found that 50% of it is Mac Keeper, and Mac Keeper is a problematic product. It always has been. It's not exactly malware. It's often considered a potentially unwanted program. They claim they're going to make your Mac faster and clean it up and stuff, but most people say you don't need it, and it's hard to uninstall. And it's not exactly malware. It's often put in the potentially unwanted program category. And they say it's used by a lot of attackers. Once it's on there, they can use it to attack your machine. I'm not sure if that's true, but if you read up on the Mac Keeper history, it's always been troublesome. One thing that surprised me is I see some serious security researcher by people working at Mac Keeper. And apparently they do some good research. So they don't regard themselves as evil. It's not exactly a virus. What they're doing is not illegal anyway, but it certainly is a highly questionable product. Of course, you could say that about all antivirus products. So some people say they just slow down your machine. They're kind of not worth the bother. But in Mac, I think it's especially true that it's not worth the bother. But anyway, all right. Whoops, I got to find the right button.